Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into an intimate journey through ancient history to unpack a deeply human flaw that honestly, quietly haunts pretty much all of us. We're going to use an incredibly powerful historical lens to explore human psychology, faith, and the hidden anatomy of fear.
So let's jump right into this with a pretty provocative question. What happens when our deeply held belief that we're the captains of our own fate is suddenly, violently, confronted by a storm of fear? Are we really in control? Or is that just a comforting little story we tell ourselves to brave the waves?
Section 1. The Paradox of Control. We're going to explore this tension using a profound historical narrative as our guide.
Now, relying on ourselves for strength feels completely natural, right? But it's inherently flawed. This is what we call the control paradox. It's essentially this psychological illusion of self-reliance that tricks us into believing we've got everything handled. But then, almost inevitably, that resolve completely crumbles when sudden fear just overrides our willpower.
Section 2. Papa's Take on Trust. To lay the groundwork here, let's look at a beautiful guiding philosophy from the author of our source newsletter, a man affectionately known as Papa. Take a second to consider this poignant thought from Papa's daughter, Emily. Overthinking is under-trusting God. Wow, right? This perfectly captures how our desperate need to figure everything out, to manage every tiny little variable, is actually a fundamental failure to yield control. Our minds spin these endless scenarios, just constantly grinding mental gears to maintain the illusion of safety. But here's the thing. When we overthink, we aren't actually finding solutions. We're really just building this fragile fortress of self-reliance. And frankly, it's a fortress that simply will not hold up under the crashing waves of intense pressure.
Section 3. Peter and the charcoal fire. Let's move over to our historical data and see exactly where the theory of the control paradox meets harsh, undeniable reality.
We're looking at a really stark, tragic contrast here. On the one hand, we have the Apostle Peter's strong-willed, fiercely overconfident promise to always stand by Jesus at absolutely all costs, even going so far as to boldly claim he would die with him. But then, on the other hand, we see the chilling reality of his failure. When he's actually confronted merely by ordinary servants, his grand, ironclad promise just shatters into a fearful, "I am not."
Meanwhile, our source points out this incredible juxtaposition. Right in the garden, Jesus demonstrates true supreme control. Simply by stating his divine identity, "I am," an entire battalion of up to 600 seasoned, heavily armed Roman warriors completely collapses in awe. Think about that. He possessed absolute, literal power, yet he willingly surrendered it. Section 4. When fear overrides will. As Jesus is arrested and taken to the high priest's courtyard, we witness exactly what happens when human willpower meets a rising tide of fear. Just watch how rapidly Peter's courage deteriorates here. Minute 1, he's challenged by a simple servant girl at the door. Minute 2, he's questioned by the crowd warming themselves around a charcoal fire. Minute 3, recognized by a relative of Malchus in the courtyard. In mere moments, his courage completely evaporates, culminating in him absolutely denying even knowing his closest friend. And this brings us to the ultimate irony of this narrative. The man in chains is perfectly at peace, perfectly in command of the truth. Yet the free man, Peter, is utterly paralyzed by his own fear, locking himself in a prison of lies just to protect his own skin. It's wild when you really think about it. Then a sudden rooster crow echoes across the cold courtyard. And just as Jesus had predicted, the exact moment that rooster crows, Peter's fragile fortress of self-reliance instantly collapses. It entirely shatters the illusion of human control, forcing him to face his own profound, undeniable weakness.
Section 5. The antidote to overthinking. So, how do we actually connect these ancient facts to the daily battles that we face? How do we find the antidote to this over-reliance on ourselves?
Well, here's a vital takeaway from the newsletter. The fiercest tests of our integrity usually don't happen in grand courtrooms or dramatic life-or-death battles. No, they happen around the casual, glowing coals of everyday conversations. When our confidence rests only on our own personal resolve, we leave ourselves completely wide open to failure in the absolute most ordinary moments.
Because just like Peter, we're so often tempted to choose the safety of silence, to just kind of blend into the shadows of the crowd when our convictions are tested. We really have to ask ourselves, when our own charcoal fire moments pop up, do we overthink our way right into denial just to stay comfortable?
Section 6. Yielding to the unknown. As we start wrapping up this explainer, let's synthesize exactly how we can move past this control paradox and find true peace, drawing directly from our source material. Here are 5 essential steps to help you actually yield control. First up, acknowledge that human self-reliance is deeply flawed. Second, recognize that true authority belongs to God alone. Third, you've got to stop overthinking just to maintain an illusion of safety. Fourth, let the rooster crows in your life, those inevitable moments of failure, lead you to honest recognition, not deeper denial. And finally, stand firm for truth even when it actively costs you your comfort.
We want to leave you with this incredibly comforting thought inspired by Papa. We really must stop relying on ourselves, fully release the illusion of control, and bravely trust God to guide us through this broken world. When we stop overthinking and finally admit our weakness, we open the door to a peace that completely surpasses human understanding.
I'll leave you with this final, provocative question to ponder. The next time a storm of fear overrides your willpower, will you desperately try to control the waves, or will you trust the anchor? I really hope this explainer sparks a desire to yield the heavy burden of control in your own life. Thanks so much for learning with us today.